Assist is a nonprofit here in Salt Lake City that was started by the School of Architecture and also by AIA Utah, which is the American Institute of Architects, back in 1969, a long time before I was around. And it's, over the years really focused on using design or leveraging design to help people in our community. And I've been with Assist for about 5 years, serving as the executive director. And in that role kind of has a variety of aspects to it, which include architecture to some degree, and also just managing our organization, applying for grants, coordinating the work that our staff does to try to help members of our community. And yeah, that's a little bit about us.
How does Salt Lake City help you in your mission, and how does that benefit residents here in the city?
It's a great question. Any nonprofit organization requires funding support in order to be able to continue to operate. And we don't generate revenue the way that a typical business would. So the funding support that comes from other either organizations or communities like Salt Lake City is critical to what we do. So Salt Lake City each year for over 4 decades now has supported our mission financially by providing us grant funding that enables us to do a variety of things. First is emergency home repairs for low-income families. So we're able to take grant funding that comes from Salt Lake City and use that money to do very critical repairs to keep families in their homes. Those include like roof repairs, plumbing repairs. If their furnace goes out in the wintertime, we're able to go in and either fix or replace their furnace for them. And then we also use that funding to provide accessibility retrofits for people that have disabilities, or for, many of the citizens of our community, as they start to get older, they find that it's more difficult to stay in their homes. So we're able to use that funding to provide accessibility retrofits for families.
How much of this do you do in a typical year in Salt Lake City?
Program wide, really, our program works throughout Salt Lake County, and program wide, we do around 400 home repairs or accessibility modifications in a year for about 350 unique families. And Salt Lake City represents about a third of that, both from a funding level and in terms of the number of people that we help. So around 120 to 150 households per year that we're helping using Salt Lake City funding.
Part of the funding mechanism that Salt Lake City uses to offer those grants to assist is the community development block grant, right? Like, how does that work? What is that process like?
So community development block grant funding comes from the federal government, and they allocate it to cities and states based off of population. So Salt Lake City each year gets an allocation of funding from the federal government, and they then put out a call for applications to other nonprofits like ours who are interested in using that funding to provide benefit to citizens of the community. So each year in the fall, when Salt Lake City puts out a call for applications, we submit an application with that basically identifies the people that we're going to help, how we plan on helping them, how we plan to use the grant funds that we receive. And then it's a little bit of a drawn out process in terms of having the city review our application, and then we actually go in typically for an interview process, and eventually the city awards funds to different nonprofits throughout Salt Lake City based off of the recommendations of the mayor and the city council. Once those funds are awarded, which typically happens, sometime in May or June, they'll let us know. And then at the beginning of July of any given fiscal year, we start expending those funds to help the clients that we serve.
What impact do you see these funds that come from the federal government and filter through the local communities? What benefit do you see, maybe even just on a personal level? How does that impact our community?
It's, as we think about federal spending, I think that many of us don't know where our taxes go. We understand that some of that goes towards roads and infrastructure. Some of it obviously goes towards supporting the military, supporting other social programs. But what's great about the Community Development Block Grant Program is that these are federal funds that are given to local communities to decide how they want to spend them. I think it's one of the best programs, honestly, that the federal government has, because it leaves so much of its use up to local control. So cities get to identify kind of in 5-year increments how they plan on spending that funding, and then they submit that plan to the federal government for approval. And once that's approved, the city then is basically free to expend those funds in a way that's most beneficial to their immediate community. And so over the years, I think Salt Lake City has used that funding for a variety of different needs that they see, including supporting some of the homeless resource centers, supporting groups that provide dental care for people free of charge. Through Community Development Block Grant funding, they provide a down payment assistance program to help families get into homes for their first time. And so there's a variety of ways that the city has identified to use that funding, and they really try to be strategic about it. And particularly in our instance, we see this funding that we receive from Salt Lake City as a way to contribute toward neighborhood stabilization. The way that Assist started originally actually was as an architecture office, nonprofit architecture firm. And one of the first things that we did was a housing study that really focused on what the housing needs were in downtown Salt Lake City. And it became readily apparent that the major threat to many of the homeowners in downtown Salt Lake, in terms of them being able to stay in their homes, was the ability to pay for home repairs. A lot of these families were kind of on the lower income scale. Their homes were aging, they were aging, and there were predatory developers in some instances that were coming in and trying to buy them out of their homes so that they could build mid-rise apartment buildings in their place. In the meantime, kind of displacing not only people, but also the history of our community. And so as that became apparent, that's when our organization started applying for these funds. And in the last 4+ decades, we've used these funds basically to help people continue to stay in their homes, to continue to contribute to what makes our neighborhoods strong and vital. And that isn't the architecture, it's the people. And so that's how I feel like this funding is just essential to what we do.
For folks who want to learn more about Assist and your mission and maybe how the city interacts with that, or maybe even getting involved, where do you send them for that?
Yeah, probably the best starting point would be our website. So that's www.assistutah.org. And if somebody needs services, we encourage them to reach out to us, typically by phone. And we would set up an appointment, go to their home, meet with them, and identify what needs to be done. If there are other people that are interested in supporting our organization through volunteer work or donations, just contacting us in similar ways.